You shared a philosophy that you've used throughout your career that I'd like to just dig into a little bit. You said your focus has always been business first, function second. Can you elaborate on what that means?
Yeah, I mean, to me, the role, right, what we do in regardless of whatever function you're in, it's there to support the overall business enterprise, right? And so sometimes I think, particularly in larger companies, right, but also in smaller companies, you get into this, you're kind of doing your functional silo, right? And what I always tell people, particularly because in the consumer packaged goods space, food, beverage, big CPG, it's always going to be a sales and marketing oriented environment, right? So the finance that you're doing there, you're doing finance not for finance, right? I tell folks that always would come into the CPG industry, if you're really in love with finance, go do iBanking, go do something like that. If that's really, really your passion, right? But ultimately, if you're going to work in really good FP&A, it's to support the business cause. And so what I don't like is functional silos, right? What I try to encourage my teams is you got to know why we're here. We're here to support the enterprise, right? Use your skills, use your insights within finance and all the great analytics that you have to help support the enterprise. So always try to put the business first and your functional priorities second, if at all possible. That will get you a long way in career and in business success, I think.
It is great. Always putting the business first. Okay, what's the strategy of the business? How does what I do tie to that? The example I always gave of business first, function second is I had about once a quarter, commissions would come due the same time as our forecast, or a couple times a year. And I would get called occasionally going, your forecast's not in the system, you're late. Like, do you want me to pay people or meet an arbitrary deadline for a forecast? Never once did they say meet the arbitrary deadline, right? It's like, hey, our people. And so I think those, that's just one small example, but I'd love a couple examples from your career of how you've applied that or how you've had your employees apply that in the workplace.
Yeah, I think a lot of it, some of the best examples are maybe when you run into an organization, and I've taken on, several different kind of, I'll call them almost maybe turnaround or organizations that maybe were just not a fine-tuned machine, if you will, right?
Sure.
And one of my examples, basically the organization, the finance organization in particular, was a little bit, I will call it shell-shocked. And what I mean by that is, they'd really lost the ability to have a seat at the table for the conversations. And so the organization really was more focused on just keeping your head down as the organization is to get that linkage that you talked about to the business, right? So the key role that I needed to do in that situation was to get our teams to understand how the work they did actually is a translation of business.
So I was going to say, how long did that process take to get the business or get finance where it was business first and help them get from being kind of shell-shocked and survival mode? Because I would imagine that's not a quick transition.
No, it was probably 18 to 24 months, realistically, right? And it comes down to having a series of small victories, right? You get in there and you start proving the worth and you get your seat back at the table. You basically help the broader organization understand that finance is there, we're objective, we're going to help drive decisions forward. That gets you and earns the right to have a seat at the table. But it's taking and using the ability to partner with the business. That's what gets you back into the game. Doing finance in a silo, if you're not connected to the business and just kind of generating things, it's just a lonely existence. And it's not fun. And we're a crucial function in driving any business forward, regardless of what the industry is.
I'm 100% with you. I've been in roles where finance really isn't involved in the business, and it's not fun. I want to work with the business and partner with them and be able to make a difference versus, okay, you just be quiet, return your report every month and leave us alone. Like, I joined a company and one of the first things I did is ask to attend the sales call because my role was coordinating between sales ops, finance, and data analytics. And it was a heavy coordination role. And they're like, oh, we'll just give you access to Clary so you can see all our deals, which was their way of saying, we don't want you on the call. We don't want you to know what's going on because there's a lot of moving things around, a lot of timing to fill the pipeline. And that eventually leads to a big gap. It's a question of when.
Correct.
And that's what happened eventually. But it was, once we got a new CFO, he's like, nope, not happening. I'll be on that call. We're having them. Here's how it's going to work. And we continued to work through that, but it was definitely a challenge at first.
Yeah. I mean, one thing I'll just add to that is I think you've got to, we talk about, when I say business first, function second, you have to have that desire to learn the business. You have to, whatever the industry is. you need to, it's almost impossible to be a really good FP&A leader, okay, with developing insights if you don't understand the business. It's just numbers then. And you may be able to identify trends, but if you don't really understand the underlying business and how it works, those insights are pretty shallow. And so that curiosity is very important for an FP&A professional.
Speaking of that, I'd love to know, what's your roadmap? You get a new opportunity, you go into a company. How do you first go about learning the business? Do you focus on kind of looking through the P&L, talking to each leader, going out on site visits? Do you have a kind of a playbook you like to use to get in and really start learning things?
Yeah, I'll tell you, it's evolved, right? So earlier in my career, it was more of the classic, I'll call it more of a traditional academic approach, right? Let me read through the reports. Let me look at the PowerPoints. Let me study, right? Probably the last 15 or 20 years of my career, that playbook I've thrown out. The playbook is to absolutely get out and see the operations, especially if it's a manufacturing company, you got to see the operations. But also, very importantly, listening, right? Listening to your business partners and listening to your team, right? That's how you actually learn. So, it's one of those where, again, probably earlier in my career, it'd be like, I'll just read the report and learn. I'll study, if you will. Now it takes a little longer, but actually meeting, talking, listening, what's on your team's mind, what's on your business partner's mind, because not only do you, get a deeper understanding of what's going on, you're starting to build that relationship, because that is a huge part of building trust and confidence in an organization. So the other thing is, you don't go into a place knowing everything, because you don't, right? You have to have that humility. You've got certainly a skill set that you bring in. That's why you're there. That's why you got the role. But the idea there is, take the time, learn the business, learn your people, learn what makes it tick. And that's probably the most important trait, I think, is just asking questions, listening, learning. And then you start to get your own, okay, now I can piece things together. I understand it better. And then you can start to make the tweaks that you want to and changes that you think are good for the organization. But, you don't go into like a bowl and china shop. It doesn't work very well.
I agree. I love how you said throughout your old playbook of the academic, I'm just going to read everything and I'll learn about the business. That's often how I did it. And the last couple hires I did in one of my companies, we started to really set up a program because we hadn't been doing a good job. And in that first week, you had them spend a day with customer support and with product. Yes, they went through some decks, but a lot of it was out listening on the phone, talking to people, trying to figure out if we get them on a sales call, whatever it might be. So much of that first week was meeting people and seeing their job. And they transition much smoother and quicker than other ones where, hey, just read about this. We'll show you how this report works. And eventually you'll have some conversations with the business.
No, so I think it's a really good discussion, Paul. I mean, the fact is the real role of FP&A, right, is to deliver those insights, to help drive the business forward. And it's very difficult to do that if you don't understand the business. And the best way to understand the business is to feel it, touch it, smell it, right? Get out there and actually, see what is going on. Once you have that understanding and you've actually kind of physically seen it, touched it, or understand the processes, then that analytics and insights that you bring as an FP&A professional, they start to link, because then the numbers start to flow and it tells the business story and generates the insights. That is a critical piece. And it's just, you can't just do that from reading a report. It's almost impossible to get the depth you need.